You had a nap, brother Vic.
Hey?
You had a nap.
No. Just sorting out some stuff on the phone.
Okay, guys, we're back. Hello? Hello? Hi, welcome back. You guys had a good break? Good. Welcome back. Okay, so I gave you a short exercise for your lunch break. Who wants to volunteer to go through that with us? You're going to have to share your screen. So Vic, I think you're going to have to allow them to share screens, okay? Who wants to volunteer? Come on, guys, we need one volunteer at least. Any volunteers? Nothing. Hi, you want to volunteer? Okay.
Yes.
Can you share your screen with me?
I was writing on the page.
Okay, put your camera on and show it to us. Let's see.
Oh, this one.
Okay, good. Explain that to us. Let me have a look. Hello, you disappeared. Just walk us through that.
Okay. I created these numbers.
I can't see it.
Is it visible?
I think your camera is off. Switch on your camera. Okay, switch it on. That's it. Good. Okay. Good to see you. Okay, what did you create? Walk us through, tell us what you did.
Yes, I calculated the numbers of the waiting period. And I sort of created a scenario, and then I did the calculations.
Right.
And when I wanted to jot them down, they were getting something that I don't get.
What was the issue?
The issue is especially with the negative numbers. I did not know where to put the negative numbers, but most of the numbers were repeating themselves.
Okay. Okay, so you did waiting time.
Yes.
Okay, read out those 20 numbers for me. Read out those numbers for me. 8, 8,
6,
carry on.
5, 12, 10, 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
8, 6, 6, 5, 5, 12, 12, 10, 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you got 10 numbers.
Yes.
Okay, so Vic, put that into that equation.
What was the
Standard deviation. Okay, so we're just going to run through this for you so you can have a look, okay? 8, 8, 6, 6, 5, 5, 12, 12, 10, 7. Okay, good. So we're now calculating. So you've got a, is that correct?
seems like it's the same as the last one.
You got a standard deviation of 3.37. What does it mean? And the mean of,
I can't see you, Bob.
you can't see
I
me.
can't see you, Bob.
Okay.
They can see the screen.
Can you see the screen?
Oh, we only see KO.
Okay, oh, they see the thing.
Okay, 1 minute.
Let's put it
Okay, so we put in those numbers, and then we got 10 numbers. We got a mean of 8.3 and a standard deviation of 3.37. Is that what you got? Man, did you get that? Did you get those numbers? Okay, so all you have to do now is you plot the graph. You got a range from 7 to 12. So let's just start at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. You got your mean of 8.7. We can put the mean there. You got standard deviation of 3. Okay, it's plus minus. So one standard deviation plus is going to be up there, one standard deviation minus up there, and then another standard deviation up there, another standard deviation down here.
Oh no,
And
it's 2.64.
what's the standard deviation?
Yeah, it's 2.64.
2.64.
This is the set law.
Okay, so and the mean?
The mean is
7.9.
7.9.
That was the previous one, yes. 7.9 mean 2.64. Okay, so let's just do this again. got those numbers. Show me those numbers.
8.
So that's 8. What did you have?
What is that for?
8, 8,
6.
6, 6,
5.
5, 5,
12.
12, 12,
10, 7.
10, 7. Okay. Okay, something like that. So you got your mean of 8. These are all the numbers that we put in. Now what we do is we add the standard deviations in. Okay, one standard deviation is plus 2.64 minus 2.64. That's another standard deviation. Another one is another 2.64 and 3. So you're going to go up 3 standard deviations at the top, 3 standard deviations at the bottom, okay, from the mean. Okay? So if you come to the negative here, that's fine, just leave it out there. But that's the range of 6 standard deviations. You can't get into a negative wait time. Okay, so it becomes irrelevant. But that's the way you... Sorry? Okay, what do you see? Okay.
I've taken out here.
And I can only see the calculation.
Okay, we're just trying to fix that.
I think it's delayed on some people's side. No, this is possible.
Is that better?
I'm gonna put you on.
No, it's still getting old. No, it's fine now.
It's fine now?
People don't
Okay.
That's fine.
What do you see?
We see you from
Okay, it seems like some of you have a delay on your side.
We see you from.
Okay.
Tell them if they've got a delay just to come out and come back in.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're experiencing a delay, maybe that's what you should do. Just exit and then come back on and see if it improves. But you should be seeing me. Who's still seeing KO? Okay, good. Good. So let's just go through this quickly again. It's important. It's very important, okay? We're always going to be, trying to figure out what reliability levels are. So we need to calculate, we need to measure, because we can only manage what we can measure, okay? A lot of times we're going to be measuring and converting to rates, to ratios, proportions, etc., because that's what we report. So what we have to do is list that, whatever we measure. So tomorrow I'm going to talk about the kinds of things we would measure. But you start by actually mapping that process as we did today. Okay, we map the process. Tasks happen there, and happen there. We've got to choose what's important, and we measure that. Okay, we measure that. And we actually have to collect the data. Now we're going to be sitting with a data set as we have. So we got a set of 25 numbers. I'm just writing anything here, but we've got the set of numbers that we've taken one thing that we wanted to measure. We've taken one thing there that we wanted to measure. We've collected all of this data. Okay? We take this data set, we calculate the standard deviation and the mean. You get that? You know how to calculate the standard deviation and mean now. You pop all of these numbers into that the website that you have, that Vic has shared with you. It will give you a mean and standard deviation. Okay? Now we plot that. We create what's called a control chart. So we take that, the numbers that we have, okay, so we plot it. Okay? And you can say, let's assume we go from 1 to 20. Okay? Assume we have a mean of 10. This would be 10. That's the mean. The mean is 10. Let's assume the standard deviation is 1. Okay? So now we're going to go 10 plus minus 1. That's 10 plus 1 is 11. 10 minus is 9. That's 9, that's 11. Another standard deviation, plus 1 is 12, minus is 8. Plus another one is 13, minus another one is 7. Okay, so we draw our lines across. Okay, so for this data set that has a mean of 10, standard deviation of 1, we have mapped it on the graph. 10 plus 2 standard deviations, that's 2 standard deviations, plus 1 minus 1. That's 4 standard deviations. Okay, plus 2 minus 2. And this is 6 standard deviations. Okay, plus 3 minus 3. The standard deviation, remember, is 1, based on the calculation. Okay, and what we have to plot now is we're taking all these numbers and we're plotting them on the graph. We're plotting them. Okay? These are all the numbers that are plotted. All of these numbers are plotted. You can see high reliability organizations, all the numbers should fall within 6 standard deviations, meaning they should fall between 10 minus 7 or 10 plus 13. So all those numbers have to fall within 6 standard deviations of the mean. Because remember what we said, 6 standard deviations approximate an error rate of 1 in a million, which is kind of what you want. Okay? So that's how you would map it, and we will come back, we'll talk more about it, but you need to start getting used to doing this. Calculate, figure out what you want to measure, measure those things, collect the data, calculate mean standard deviation, and then plot those in the control chart. Remember, you want to be within 6 standard deviations. That's what you want to be. Any questions about this?
Yes, Prof, I'm having a question.
Yes.
When we do our standard deviation, I got 2, the 1 minus and then 1 plus.
Yeah.
But then after that, there's still some 2 or 3 numbers left that are not within the deviation. Do I count them or do I leave them and say I'm having 2 standard deviations?
I don't understand. So here you got a mean of 10, you got a standard deviation of 1. So it's plus minus 1. Okay, so if you look, there's your mean. I'll make that in red. There's your mean. Okay, I'm taking green and I'm saying your mean plus 1 will be up there, minus 1 is going to be here. Okay? plus 2 standard deviations. It's going to be in blue. So it will be 2 standard deviations plus is 2 minus, it's minus 2. So okay, it's 2. Can you see this?
Yes, I can.
So that's 2 standard deviations there. Plus 1, minus 1. This is 4 standard deviations. Plus 2, minus 2. And then at the top in black is 3 standard deviations. Okay, so now this is plus 3 minus 3, which is 6 standard deviations. So we then take all these numbers and plot them on. And they all are going to fall some here. You might get some numbers that are above and some numbers below. That means that your system is not stable, that you are not functioning within the parameters of high reliability. That's what it means. Because if you're within 6 standard deviations, means you're actually you are reliable. That you have some variation. The numbers are not all the same. You have some variation, but we call it normal cause variation. You may have some numbers above, in this case 13, and in below 7, you're out of those 6 standard deviations. Okay, it means that you're not highly reliable. That's what it means. Your defect rate is more than 1 in a million.
Can I say something, Prof?
Yes.
I'm looking at my exercise, the exercise that I attempted to do it,
Yeah.
and my count was 15.
15, you had 15 data points.
Yes.
Yes.
My mean was 12. When I divide the count just up, my mean was 12.
Right.
And my standard deviation is 5.3.
Right.
So when I put them, I put the numbers on that mean whatever I okay.
Yeah.
I think one standard deviation should be within 5.3.
Yes. So it will be 12 plus 5.3, 12 minus 5.3. So if I change this 10 and put 12 here, and then this line will be, then I take off 12 minus 5.3, this one will be at 6.7, the bottom one. Yeah. Yes.
Under that 6 point something, there's 5, there's 4, there's 3.
Yes.
And I'm preparing to say, is that the one that you say is normal cause variation or what?
Normal cause variation is the variation, is any number within these 6 standard deviations is normal cause variation. The numbers outside of this one and this, is special cause variation. Those are your defects.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
So if you have all numbers within the 6 standard deviations, you're fine. Means you have a stable process. You're not all the same, because in human nature you get variation, but it's not something that you should worry about. Okay, so that's how you do it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Now if you measure, we can come back to this, but we'll probably do this again tomorrow. Even the numbers within these 6 standard deviations and the way they distributed and the pattern suggests something to us, okay, which we can address. So there may be a trend upwards, there may be a trend downwards, there may be some flattening, we have to explain that. We can't just explain that with an average of 10, or in your case an average of 12. Averages from a management point of view don't help us. We can't manage an average. Okay? And this is why this concept of control charts, understanding means and standard deviations is important. Because standard deviation is the variation of explains the variation. The broader your standard deviation is, means that there's a lot of variation in the way things are happening. If you have a very small standard deviation, it means there's not a lot of variation. That's what it means. That's what standard deviation means. It means the deviation from your normal is small or big. Now, ideally, you want a small standard deviation. Okay, so if you have all these numbers exactly the same, your mean is going to be that, your standard deviation will be 0 because it's the same thing. Do you understand that? Where we're getting at? Yeah, so it's a very important concept. Okay, so just to summarize, reliability is essentially comprises two component parts. It's one, it is the level of functionality, and two, it's over time. So when you talk about reliability, it's always, I'm doing something right and I do it over this time. That's what reliability is about. Okay? Now we need to be able to calculate that and explain that and make that visible for every single thing that we do in our organization. So whether it's social services, whether it's airlines, or whether it's healthcare, we are all engaged in a series of processes in the delivery of our service. We have to defragment that and calculate reliability of every step and every task within that. Okay? That's the whole idea. And that will get us to a point, and constant improvement will get us to the point that we can classify ourselves at high reliability, meaning that we only have one defect in a million events. That for every million clients we see, only once will we take extra time to greet, an extra time to pull the file, an extra time to complete the report, etc. So you can see it's not easy to become highly reliable. It has a lot of implications for operations and the way you design workflow, etc. But the key is there are organizations that operate at that level. We need to get there for social services. In fact, the whole public sector, the aspirational goal is to all function at high reliability. Meaning for the 100th time that you do things correctly and on time 999,999 times out of a million. Okay? Industries do that. Airline industries achieve that level of safety. Nuclear power plants achieve that level of safety. So there's a lot of industries that achieve that. In healthcare, we're particularly bad. Some of what we do operate at 10 to the minus 1, meaning that we have a defect in every 10 consults. It's pretty common. So depending on what the actual procedure is or process, so I'll tell you neonatal mortality. Neonatal mortality rate is approximately 10 to the minus 3. What does that mean? What does that mean? If I tell you neonatal mortality is 10 to the minus 3, what does that mean?
It means that 1 out of every 1,000 babies die.
Absolutely, excellent. So if I tell you polypharmacy amongst elderly is 10 to the minus 2, what does that mean?
1 out of 100 kids.
No, polypharmacy, meaning polypharmacy in adults, older people getting too much of medication, 10 to the minus 2.
It's 1 out of 100.
Yes, it means that for every 100 elderly people, they're getting more than 2 medications. Okay, so if I say that measuring the error rate for measuring HbA1c. Now, the HbA1c is how we assess diabetes. The error rate for that is 10 to the minus 1. What does that mean? It means that 1 in 10 patients do not get tested. That's what it means. Okay, so in healthcare, it's a major issue. And this is why I'm making a concerted effort to inculcate this philosophy into healthcare. In social services, it doesn't exist. As I said to you, you are the first group that's ever going through a program where we're trying to inculcate this philosophy of high reliability into social services. Okay? And it all comes down to defects. Now, a defect, as I said, in the airline industry could result in a death. A defect in a nuclear power plant could result in a death. Defects in healthcare could result in severe injuries, could result in death. In social services, a defect could result in a poor client experience, a poor family experience, poor staff experience, or amongst other things, or in death as well, with the issues of gender violence and stuff. So reducing that error rate to less than 1 in a million is absolutely critical, okay? Which means we have to start doing things very differently to be able to do that. And at the heart of that whole thing is this. Now let me just say let me just erase half of this. So if you see this part, which is just kind of the same graph, and I just kept this portion. If I take this and I turn it around this way, what I'm going to get is that I'm going to get the mean, and I'm going to get 1 standard deviation, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 standard deviations. Okay, that's 2, that's 4, and that's 6. Okay, that's called the bell curve. That's the bell curve. Okay, where most of the data under here are at least 4 standard deviations. Okay, so 66% of data, usually 66% of data, 2 standard deviations, 95% of data, 4 standard deviations, 99.99% of data is within 6 standard deviations. Okay, that's kind of what's called the bell curve. That's a normal distribution of data. That's how, no matter what data set you collect, it'll fall under that curve. Okay? With most data points falling between 2 standard deviations, 66% of the data will fall within 2 standard deviations. 95% of data will fall between 4 standard deviations, and 99.9% of data will fall within 6 standard deviations. Okay? That's a normal distribution. Now, if you got a mean of 12, it doesn't mean you're doing really well. It doesn't mean that. Your process might be stable and reliable, but it might not be where you want to be. Because this is the value of benchmarking. When you benchmark wait times between your unit and between a unit in a different province, and you're getting 12 minutes and they're getting 9 minutes, it means you're reliable, but at the upper limit. And where you want to be is actually at 8 minutes or better. So it means you've got to change your whole process to drop those numbers down. That's what it means. Okay? So being within 6 standard deviations, it just means that it's stable. But you could be doing stuff incorrectly, but in a very stable way. So you're going to understand that. And this is the value of benchmarking. So if you benchmark wait times and the best unit in the country, the wait time for the first social worker consultation is 10 minutes. You're at 12 minutes, but you are stable. It means you're reliable, but you're not optimization. You're not optimizing. That process is not optimal. So you have to drop that whole graph down to 8 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, but we'll talk more about that. Okay, so any questions about what we covered this morning in terms of definition of reliability? What does it mean? What is unreliability? How do we actually describe it, frame it? What does it mean from an illustration point of view? Anybody has any questions about that? Are you comfortable with what we've done so far? Yeah. So what I want to do now is kind of break away a bit. This is just basic nuts and bolts that we covered. And as I said, yes. Okay, what are you struggling to calculate? For standard deviation. There is a formula, but it's too complicated. You don't want to do it mechanically. You can do it mechanically, but all you have to do is put it into it's automated on the website. The link we sent to you. You can use that link, and there's several other links. Okay, you can even use a calculator that can calculate standard deviation. So it is not you can work it out manually. It'll take a long time, but there's an equation for that. But you can just use your smart device and get it instantaneously. All you have to do is how to calculate standard deviation. Just Google that and it'll pull up a few links that actually will do it for you. So it's pretty simple. It's not something that I'm expecting you to do manually. Is that clear? And practice it. Now Vic has put, in the chat room, Vic has put the link there. So if you cut that link out, put it into your search engine and keep it there. Every time you want to calculate it, just click, populate the numbers, click sample, hit calculate. It'll give you the mean, standard deviation, median, and all of that. Okay? But when it comes to reliability, it's all about standard deviations and being within 6 standard deviations. That's what it's about. So I wanted to just kind of get this out of the way before we get into the nuts and bolts of high reliability. Okay? So we'll come back tomorrow and do more calculations. But what I also want to do now is I said to you that this whole philosophy of high reliability has its genesis in the airline industry. So the airline industry had a very high defect rate. In the case of the airline industry, it was plane crashes. Safety was a big issue. They were losing a lot of planes, they were losing a lot of passengers, and they needed to figure out how to improve that. So the case that we're going to show you is where it all started. This is the real case. Okay, following on this case, the airline industry took a serious rethink about everything and how they did everything. And they put in place a series of recommendations and changes that dramatically changed the airline industry to make it today one of the safest modes, if not the safest mode of transport. So how did they go from the 70s, where it was the most unsafest, to now? They put in a whole lot of things to enable them to do that. And when academics like I go back and we try and figure out, well, what is it? What is it that allowed them to do this? And if we compare other industries that perform just as well, what are the common threads that come out that make them so reliable? In other words, they perform at a certain level of functionality, they perform consistently over a long time. They perform error-free over a period. How do they do it? And when we studied these industries, we picked up about 6 or 7 things that characterize all of them. And those 6 or 7 things is what we call, the philosophy of high reliability organizations. And that philosophy can be used irrespective of the industry you're in. And as I said, it is becoming big now. We're introducing it into healthcare in South Africa. We're starting to do that with you in social services. We're going to do that in public services. We're going to do that in police services. A lot of industries can benefit by this philosophy of high reliability. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the afternoon is I'm going to show you a case now. This is the case. This is the original case. It's a true event. Okay, something that really happened. Some of you may or may not remember it. And then we'll discuss this, and then we'll come back and I'll summarize, well, okay, these are the things that, based on this, that the airline industry put in place to enable us to, get to this point where we don't even think twice to go into to get onto a plane. Okay, did anybody have a question? Any questions? Any questions? Can you guys hear me? Okay, so Vic is going to play. This is the video. It's about 18 minutes. You gotta be very attentive. As I said, it's a true case. It's emotional, but you'll get the point. We'll come back and discuss that. So watch the case. We'll come back and discuss it, and then see what we can learn from it. Okay? Okay, Vic. Volume. Okay, guys? What do you think? So what you saw was a real case. Something that really happened. Of course, it's a simulation, but what you saw really happened and changed the life of an industry, which has subsequently led us to today, this philosophy of high reliability and what high reliability organizations do. You can trace it all back to that event all these decades ago. Okay, so who wants to kind of kick off and tell us, give us the story and give us their opinions about what they think happened? A lot of that they helped you at the end explaining, but give me your impressions about this, about the case. Anybody? I expect all of you to. It's a moving case, absolutely moving, but that's where the power is. It's in that. Okay, so comments? What comments do you have about after watching that? What comments do you have?
No clarity in terms of communication.
Sorry?
No clarity in terms of communication.
No clarity in terms
Okay, so communication, critical, good. Any other observations? This is a rich case. Sorry?
They mentioned something about it was the one pilot's first flight after 3 months.
Okay, which pilot was that? Come on, guys. Flight after 3 months. Okay. What are the observations? What went wrong?
There was no follow-up.
No follow-up with what?
From the control room.
No follow-up from the tower. I'm not trying, I don't know, what are you trying to say when you say no follow-up?
What I'm trying to say is, when the flight is landing, they need to tell them which line to take and also check in the time. So the other flight will be passing here this time, then the other one will be passing on the other line. So they need to check and inform them.
Okay, but why couldn't they do that? Why couldn't they, yeah. Okay, visibility was an issue. So weather, right, good. So they couldn't actually see the planes. They're sitting at the tower, but because the fog is so thick, they can't see the planes. Good. And remember, this happened in 1977. It's a while ago. Okay, good. What else? What else went wrong? Sorry? Okay, so query plane too big, so airport, okay, design issue, yeah, what else? Good.
They also lack of knowledge on the part of the tower staff because they didn't know
So ATC, the controller issues, good. Okay. What else? Yes?
There's too much happening in the background.
Yeah, there's too much of background noise, so I can't hear. So those of you who are not talking, please mute. There's some.
No, it's from Dan's
Yeah.
perspective.
Okay, so just go ahead again. What were you saying? Okay, so communication within the cockpit you're talking about.
But no, communication to the KLM flight.
Yeah. So what communication are you referring to in flight 4805? Yeah. Okay, so it's ATC instructions. That's one, but what about the communication in the cockpit? Okay. Anybody else come step in now? There's a lot of you on, so everybody can contribute. What went wrong? What are the things that are going wrong? Yeah. I'm listening. Yes, okay. So 80s, okay. Right, so there's miscommunication from the air traffic control and misinterpretation, good. What else? Okay, so the policies were an issue as well. Okay, good. Okay, so if the pilots don't, sorry? Yeah. Right. Okay. What else? What else? What else went wrong? There's a several things that went wrong.
I think also the captain was a captain that was used for simulator
Yes.
aircraft.
Yeah.
Which is not the same as flying with real life.
Okay, so we got that here. Yeah, so the captain was flying after 3 months, simulated. And what else about that captain? What's his name?
I don't remember his name, but I also gathered that he was anxious by the use of the language when he said, let's get the fuck out of here. He was delayed, so he just wanted to get out and make time. And might have not been very careful in ensuring the safety of his
What?
passengers.
Yeah, well, that was actually the Pan Am captain talking, meaning he needed to get out of the runway. But the KLM, what is the KLM captain? Sorry?
From the ATC, the use of language, and I think somewhere they also said they stopped using takeoff unless
Yes.
they meant
Yes.
which means that is bigger than
Okay.
and
You're right. So the whole issue there was cleared for takeoff does not mean takeoff. Okay? So remember this was 1977. Good, that's a good observation. Good. We're listening. Go ahead.
no, I think I'm done.
Okay, who's next? Who?
Didn't write it down, the pilot's names, but the pilot said we're having concerns regarding the flight time
Yeah.
and the license.
Right. Yeah, that was the KLM crew. The KLM crew were trying to get back because if they didn't leave in time, they essentially meant that they had to stay there and get another crew to come in and take. It has a lot of implications, cost, etc., etc. Good? That's a good, so that kind of falls into the component of policy. Good observation. What else? What else went wrong? What else went wrong? Go ahead.
The measurements in terms of the route 10 that we're supposed to take.
Yeah.
The other one was supposed to be 90 degrees, whatever, and then 245. I think the measurements in terms of how they're supposed to take.
Yeah, so you're right. So that boils down to the issue of the actual design of the airport and whether that airport could handle the 747s, whether the airport could handle the 747s, whether the air traffic controllers had the experience, when they've had several aircraft. It begs the question, was the decision to actually send these two planes to a small airport the right decision in the first place? Because remember, these pilots actually requested to circle and they didn't want to go to the smaller airport, but they were forced to go there. So the point is that, if you look at this, and I've asked you how to prevent this, you will come up with essentially 100 different things that you could have done to prevent this. And the reality is what happened is the airline industry did that. They took this case and they spent several years analyzing every single, at that time was obviously the largest plane crash of its nature. They analyzed every single thing from communication to weather, radar, etc., etc. And what they did is they came up with a book that's literally this thick in terms of how to actually operate aircraft safely. Everything from communication to implementation of radar on the ground. So if you look at what happened in 1977, you look at today, it's chalk and cheese, okay? Because the airlines have put in place substantive improvements and they've actually codified things from the communication in the cockpit. it's codified, which means that it's standardized. Pilots can't have casual conversations with each other. There's a special reporting mechanism, although the captain is in charge, but he's not necessarily the sole person who makes the decision. That was a big issue in this case, where Van Zanten from KLM, he was the chief pilot. He was the chief pilot of the airline. He was also the chief trainer of the airline. And the other pilots in the cockpit felt a bit intimidated, telling him that they were not even cleared for takeoff, and yet he took off. Okay, but was it his fault? You can say not really, because, he should not have been allowed to fly after not flying for 3 months. He should not have been allowed, the captain. So the airlines put in place several changes that dramatically changed and addressed every single thing. From communication, they've standardized communication with air traffic control, standardized communication with pilots. They have implemented and used a lot of technologies like radar especially. So now you actually have ground radar. You never had it before. So air traffic controllers can actually monitor aircraft that are on the airport, and they know where the aircraft is. They improved air radar, so they know where that is. They actually have put protocols in place in terms of deviating aircraft to other airports, etc. They've implemented what's called crew resource management, total control and total kind of new communication approaches within the cockpit. So the book is essentially literally that thick. And as a result of all of this, started changes caused a cultural change in the airline industry, and at the moment they operate as high reliability organizations from a safety point of view. So their error rate is far less than 10 to the minus 6. Okay, if you have to kind of look at either the number of flights, the number of flight passengers, or the number of flight hours, and you look at the error rate, it's insignificant. Okay, so way better than 1 in a million. So if you go back and you kind of analyze, well, what are the things that are really characteristic of high reliability? So the case I gave you is the airline industry. I took a plane crash. This was the genesis, but I could have showed you a whole lot of other cases of other industries where organizations have reduced their error rate from what it used to be pretty high to quite low now. So, from 10 to the minus 1, where they're having 1 incident in 10, to less than 10 to the minus 6, where they're having less than 1 incident in a million events. So when you look at that and you kind of summarize and you try and get, well, what are the things that these guys do? You get to this philosophy of high reliability. Okay? You get to the philosophy of high reliability. And these are the kind of 6 things that I want you to remember. Okay? Of HROs. Okay. These are things that characterize high reliability organizations. It's something that you're going to ingrain in yourself, you're going to embed in yourself. And what we want to do is we'll kind of constantly bring this up, and I'm going to cover it over and over and over again with you, so you'll understand everything about it. Okay? So the first thing is that they have a preoccupation with failure. Okay? 1, they are preoccupied with failure. Preoccupation with failure. Okay, write that down. Preoccupation with failure. All high reliability organizations are characterized by this preoccupation with failure. That's something that came out of this crash. Okay? Pilots constantly ask themselves, what if? It's constantly, what if this goes wrong? What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? What if this goes wrong? And that constant preoccupation with failure means that they put in place mitigating factors to ensure that that does not happen. Because before they start the flight, they assume something is going to go wrong. Okay? And they have a protocol in place in case it goes wrong. So essentially, this preoccupation with failure means you have to thoroughly understand the processes and the tasks required for a successful flight in this case. Now, preoccupation with failure in the context of social services the concept is the same thing. Understand your process, okay? We spoke about this kind of generic process this morning. Each of this process has several tasks. Each of these steps have tasks with it. Okay? So a preoccupation with failure means, and this is the security check, this is the COVID check, this is the social worker screening, this is the social worker consult, and then the referral to supervisor note back, and then from there it goes to intervention. Okay? Preoccupation for failure means you have to understand all of the processes in social services. So you've got to map this thing out. Everything. Every single process within your organization has to be mapped out. Then you have to identify the tasks within each step. Okay, so we covered some of this in the last module. So the first task may be acknowledge at 10 meters, greet at 5 meters. Security questions that you have to ask, or do you actually pat down people or scan them, whatever it is. So these are the different tasks we have to understand. And then we have to understand, well, a preoccupation failure means that we assume this person is going to do the things wrong. They're going to fail in their duty. What happens in the event that the security check is not successful? What do we do? Okay, that's a preoccupation with failure. What happens if the COVID screening is not successfully executed? Okay, what happens if the social worker, the screening consult, is not successfully executed? What happens if the social worker consult is not successful, or the supervisor's note is not completed in time? So preoccupation with failure is these organizations constantly assume that stuff is going to go wrong. They constantly assume that they're going to get variation from these 6 standard deviations, that we're always going to get something out. But more importantly, they also use that anticipation to design. Okay, they design to failure-proof it. But to design to failure-proof it, you have to understand the process first. Secondly, you have to understand what can go wrong. You then have to understand what's the impact if that goes wrong. And then you have to understand, well, if it does go wrong, what do we do? That's this preoccupation. Now, the airlines, that's what they do. It's check after check after check. Even the aircraft has got redundancy built in. You might not know this, but the planes are built in with 2 and 3 of everything. So if one fails, they've got a second thing to go through, and if the second fails, in some cases they have a third. Redundancy is built into the plane. Everything from whether it's brakes to electronic circuits or whatever, it's all duplicated. That's preoccupation with failure, because we know we're going to have a problem. Okay, so they build in redundancy. Now that's an important thing in your process. So we don't even do this in healthcare, we don't do this in social services, because we just kind of casually carry on doing things the way we always do it. But that's not how high reliability organizations function. They are preoccupied with failure. They map out the processes. They identify things that will go wrong. They have mitigation factors in place, so they know how to respond. Okay? Now that's a critical characteristic of high reliability organizations. That's something that helps them to actually stay within those margin of errors. Now remember, by definition, high reliability organizations very rarely have things go wrong, because they're operating at 10 to the minus 6 or better. So they're already in a situation where they're getting less than one failure per million events. So they have very few things do go wrong. They may have several near misses. So they treat a near miss as a failure. Okay, so remember that. It is a near miss is, in the case, I'll give you a... So somebody comes in, a client comes in, repeat visit, goes to pick up the file, and there's 2 David Joneses, okay? And the receptionist picks up the incorrect David Jones, gives it to the patient. The patient checks and says, no, the address is not mine, it's not my file, shows it to the receptionist. The receptionist looks at it, corrects it, gives them the right file. Now, a high reliability organization will not just say, okay, there was no issue here. That particular event was a near miss, and it is regarded as a failure because it came pretty close to going wrong, and which means that we now need to put in place a system or some process to mitigate that. Because in your space, incorrect files, identification is absolutely critical. So this preoccupation with failure, that stuff is going to go wrong, and how do we build redundancy in and prevent this thing from going wrong? How do we pick up a near miss, and how do we treat a near miss as if it is really a failure? Okay, so that's important. Preoccupation with failure. 2 is they have a reluctance to simplify. Okay, they have a reluctance to simplify. Important. Okay? They don't accept simplistic explanations for anything. Now, if you look at this case that we did, the Tenerife plane crash, it took several years for them to do the analysis and understand what went wrong. And they do not, you can see that up to today. It takes years to investigate an accident in the airline industry, because they don't just, it's not we meet at a boardroom and as you would have, some of you say, oh, well, it's a communication error. Okay? That's a simplistic explanation. So if you drill down and the case file and you look at the accident report for Tenerife, it's this big. Okay? And what they do is they go down to root cause. They figure out how errors occur as a multitude of things that go wrong and never a single thing. Okay, so if a file is incorrectly filled or the case is not correctly documented, there's always other things contributing to that. And just accepting simplistic explanations for why the file is incorrect or not incomplete is not going to cut it. So you have to actually drill in and investigate, get to root cause, try and understand what's happening. And this is why this data is important. Collecting data, real-time data, not using just means and averages is pretty useful. Okay? So don't accept simplistic explanations for anything. Understand that defects, now a defect, remember I told you, could be anything. Patients not being greeted, staff not being greeted, incorrect file, too long, a defect could be anything. Remember that a defect arises as a result of many things going wrong. This plane crash happened because of many things that went wrong. And if just one thing did not occur, this would have been averted. I mean, just if you think about it, the fact that they allowed the passengers to get off the plane and they had to wait for them to get back on, if that didn't happen, this crash would not have happened. because these planes would have got away earlier, the fog would not have been that much, they would have seen each other, and no, something as simple as that. Okay? If they didn't refuel while they waited, the KLM plane would not have been that heavy because the extra fuel, actually, because the KLM plane almost cleared the Pan Am plane. But the extra fuel that they filled while they were waiting increased the weight of the plane couldn't get off above that. So and every single one of these things contributed, and they all came together at the same time. So that's the nature of defects. So you can't just give a simplistic reason for why you have a deviation in whatever activity or whatever process you measure. Okay? It requires a pretty thorough analysis of what went wrong. It requires an understanding of your processes and requires you to have the right data. Okay? So that's 3. They do not accept simplistic explanations. The 4th is they have a sensitivity to operations. Strong sensitivity to operations. Okay? What does that mean? Strong sensitivity to operations. So if you look at this, when we talk about operations and processes, etc., we're talking about this. Okay? Patient comes in, is greeted by the security guard asks questions, etc., and then they go, wait, they go to the COVID test, they're greeted again, fill in a questionnaire, temperature, etc., then they go and wait again. So this is your operations. Okay? How reliability organizations understand this operations, this process? Okay? Now, how many of you in your organization have mapped out all your activities in this way? Have what you call a process map for every service line, or a value stream map? How many of you have it? Anybody has it? Well, I'll be surprised. I'm assuming nobody has it. Am I right? Hello?
I think most of us have it.
You have all of these flow charts?
Yes.
With the tasks in each one? With the tasks at each level? Sorry?
Who is the process?
You have a flow chart.
Yes.
The flow chart is different to this. The big steps of the flow chart. Operations is, sensitivity to operations is you have all the tasks in between, and you have that graphic representation. You remember your graph, your control chart? You have them for each one. You know the mean, median, standard deviation for each task. You also know when there's a hint or suggestion that that process is not stable. When you're moving towards the 6 standard, when you're moving out of the 6 standard deviations, that's what sensitivity to operations is. It's not a flow chart. These are two different things. Sensitivity to operations means that you understand all of these tasks within. Each one you have the data to understand exactly how much of time it should take. You understand when there's a deviation from that, when you're beyond the 6 standard deviations. That's what it means. Okay? For each one. So this is the kind of thing you have to do. How else are you going to know that this whole process is stable? The reason that you take too long with a client could be anywhere here. Okay? And you have to identify which task within which of these steps is accounting for maybe that prolonged consultation time or that defect in whatever shape or form it is. Okay? That's what sensitivity to operations are. They understand that. They have the data, they understand what's going right, what's going wrong, because that helps them predict and identify issues they may face. Okay, so as I said, when we measured the wait times, you can see, although most of the numbers are within the 6 standard deviations. There were few there that were out. That's called special cause variation. We need to investigate that. You may also find within the 6 standard deviations, you may find data points going up successively. Like 6 or 7 data points showing that the waiting time has been going up. Now, although it's within the 6, you may think it's stable, which it is, but within that, there's a suggestion that the instability is creeping in. So that's what sensitivity to operations is all about. Okay? Having real-time data, not just a flowchart, but having the data for every task within that. Okay? They're very sensitive to operations, so they understand that, they have the data real-time, they know when the system is going to be unstable. Okay? That's important. They have a commitment to resilience. They're very resilient. Okay? They're extremely resilient. Now, it means they come back. They always come back. And the reason they do that is in large part because of all of these things. They have a thorough understanding of the processes, of the operations. They have the data. They have anticipated that things are going to go wrong in each step. They know what the impact's going to be when those things go wrong. And they have put in place mitigation factors for that. They have put in place for that. Okay? So it's extremely important that we do that. That's what high reliability is all about. Okay? This is what makes them resilient, because they come back. They always come back. This is the classic characteristics of high reliability organizations. They anticipate the defect. When it does occur, it's rare. They're able to resume operations pretty quickly. And it's pretty much the same for the airline industries as well. They take some time, but they actually are able to get going pretty quickly. Okay? Number 5 is they defer to expertise. They defer to expertise. Now, you know, in most organizations, expertise is associated with your title and with your position. In a high reliability organization, expertise is the person who does the work. Okay, so if you have an issue, this is not something that has to be solved at the level of a boardroom. Okay, it's always solved by the people who are actually doing the work. You know, it's a pretty common issue we face in a lot of organizations where if things go wrong, you know, it's the C-suite guys who close up in a conference room and try and figure out what went wrong, without including people who are actually involved with the cold face doing the work. Expertise in high reliability organizations are actually people who do the work. Okay, so if you're working through issues, if you're working through problems, make sure around the table you have people that actually do the work. Okay? It's absolutely critical. And then finally, number 6 is they actually have a mindset of, it's almost kind of what I would call a communal kind of mindset. You know, they learn as communal mindset. They learn as a group. They learn as an industry. Okay? If there's an issue with one airline, with a specific type of aircraft, the whole world knows about it instantaneously. I mean, you know, so if I have to give you a kind of use case, if a plane lands in OR Tambo Airport from London, and it's a Boeing 747, when the plane lands, and let's assume there's an issue with the landing gear that's picked up at OR Tambo, what happens is they ground the flight here, they figure out what the issue is, and then they contact Boeing, they contact British Airways. Boeing then gets every single airline to check and see that the aircraft that they are flying doesn't have the same issue. They may ground the planes. But instantaneously, within an hour, each one of those aircraft flying throughout the world, irrespective of the airline, knows something went wrong. They know what to look for. They need to be aware, alert, so that they don't encounter any issues. Now, it's a very rare thing, but that's exactly how high reliability organizations function. Okay? If there's an issue with a nuclear power plant X, before you know it, nuclear power plant A, B, C, D, E, F, G, they all know what went wrong, what could be the potential contributors, how was it resolved instantaneously. So they can go out and check, make sure everything is safe, that they don't have the same issue. Okay? So this kind of communal mindset is a critical characteristic of high reliability organizations. They learn as a group. Okay? They learn as a group. Extremely important. Extremely important. Okay? So any questions? So when you kind of decode, all the changes that the airline industry has made, you go back, you can attribute it to these 6 things. Okay? So it's not specifically communication. They have cleaned up all of that, but they assume, they make an assumption that there will be a communication error. Okay? They make an assumption that there'll be weather issues, etc., etc. But these are the characteristics, the 6 characteristics of high reliability organizations. We just have to use the same philosophy in social services. And if we do that, we can kind of achieve the same error-free rate. And once again, I'll just re-emphasize. Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Can you repeat characteristics 5 and 6?
Number 5 is defer to expertise. Defer to expertise. Number 5 is defer to expertise. Remember, defer to expertise means the experts in high reliability organizations are people who actually do the work. Okay? Any other questions?
I missed
Number 2 is reluctance to simplify. They do not accept simplistic explanations for anything. And remember, all these readings that have all of these things are posted. You have the readings. You should have received, I think I sent you about 3 or 4 readings, plus it's on the learning management system. It's all in there. Okay? Number 6, I've got a kind of communal mindset. They learn as a community and as an industry. So if one airline has something go wrong, all the airlines in the world and aircraft manufacturers know about it instantaneously. They share the information. High reliability organizations, remember, share information openly and freely and transparently within the organization and with others. Okay? There is no, you can see even in this, you could have attributed blame to pilots. That's what we do in most industries. We will blame it on somebody. High reliability organizations don't blame it on people. Okay? It's always something wrong in the system. Because the premise is very simple. That we are human and we will err. But no human goes to work to crash a plane, or to put out a wrong file, or to complete a file incorrectly. That's just not what we do. Okay, so generally, high reliability organizations focus on some of the systemic stuff that goes wrong that enable us to make those errors. Okay? And if we can eliminate all of those things that contribute to the error, like in the case of Van Zanten, there was a rational explanation for why he quickly actually wanted to take off without getting clearance. And the explanation there was simple, that this guy it was his first flight after being in a simulator for 3 months. Simulators don't have air traffic controllers, so you don't have to report to them. Coming out of a simulator for 3 months, of course, he ignored the air traffic controller. So they changed, the airline changed. If you actually read the policy framework now, they make it explicitly clear, when you come off a simulator, you cannot be in charge of a flight. Okay, you have to work for at least 3 flights as a first officer before you can then resume as the captain. So they didn't blame him. They attributed it to this, and you know what? It's justified. That this is, so we call that this just culture. HROs have a just culture. It's not a blame culture. We investigate not to attribute blame to individuals. We investigate to try and make sure we get to the root cause so we can prevent errors from happening. Even a simple explanation, why does somebody not acknowledge a client when they're 10 meters away? Why are they not doing it? You know? So we need to try and understand that. Does anybody have questions about what HROs are, really?
It's not a question as such, Prof, but just a comment.
Yeah.
If you were to say to us, looking at the characteristics of HRO, where are we as public service?
Public service 10 to the minus 1. No, I'm just being honest with you. That's where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that also, to say it's -1.
Yeah. 10 to the minus 1. That's where we are.
Yes, because we have processes in place, but then the implementation of those processes is something else.
Yeah. Absolutely. But we want to change it. I'm working with almost every single minister, you know, so we have a lot of great documents. Nothing in any of our policy documents across any of the ministries has got anything about high reliability. It is how do we actually run the public services efficiently and use data to do that. Okay, so it's something that we want to start, and you know, you are the first group, to be honest with you, so I think you have the opportunity, you know, because what I'm talking about, ultimately at the bottom of everything lies data. And trying to understand, you know, what the issues are. So you know, failure to acknowledge a client at 10 meters may well be attributed to a staff burnout issue, you know. But we can't blame them. We've got to investigate and see what the issue is. But how are we going to know, well, who's acknowledging at 10 and who's not? Unless we collect the data, measure it, and then try and understand what's contributing to this person greeting and acknowledging, and what's contributing to this person not. That's what this is all about. Okay? That's what this is all about. Yes?
David, looking at the 6 elements that you've given us, do you think it's necessary for the department to come up with a policy, or it should just be an approach from a particular manager?
Well, I think these are philosophical approaches, but you will never find anything out there on high reliability in the context of social services. It doesn't exist. So we have to create it. We have to create it. And I think, you know, if it's something that you have an interest in, reach out to me, because, so we're writing. I've got manuals and books that I'm writing in HROs. What does it mean from a hospital point of view? Okay? So what does high reliability mean from a social services point of view? There's a big gap for that. So it's, you know, this is philosophically, it's the same, but we customize each one, because a failure and defect in social services is not the same as healthcare, is not the same as the airline industry. is not the same as nuclear power plants. But failure in the context of social services may be something else which we will describe. But it's a failure all the same. It's a defect all the same. Because, you know, it's more than 10 to the minus 6.
Because I'm looking at our situation, because you find us struggling with a particular indicator for more than 5 or 10 years. Ever since I joined the department, we've been struggling with foster care. And unfortunately, we don't come up with something that is different.
Yeah.
Always face the very same challenge and implement the very same interventions that have not made an impact in the past.
Yeah. No, I mean, so part of tomorrow and your final module is we'll be giving you the tools because a lot of this is just a diagnostic part, you know, getting all of this. Tomorrow is more quantitative. What is a process to diagnose? You know, I mean, you have to understand that diagnostic process to mitigate against failure, you know, to have a sensitivity to operations. So we're going to give you these tools to actually do that. But I agree with you. You know, I think it was Einstein who said the definition of insanity is, trying the same thing and expecting a different outcome. It's exactly that. Yeah. But you won't. You see, if you just if you just prefer simplistic explanations for why something is not working, you'll never correct it. So if you look at the airline disaster, it's, you know, they didn't blame the pilot because that would have been very easy to do. They didn't blame the air traffic controller. That would have been easy to do. They didn't do that. They went back and got the contributing factors to why these guys failed in their task. That's what you have to do. So why is the foster care thing failing? I mean, it's, you know, it's not, and the main thing about what you learned in the case, it's never a single cause. It's all things, it's usually multiple things that happen, and sometimes when all of these things happen together, you get what you just saw. And just one thing, if you just prevent one thing, you could have saved the lives of 600 people. So I mean, I love the case that you're talking about, and maybe we should you know, actually work around those real cases using this philosophy. But, you know, I encourage you to read those readings. This is your domain of expertise. Social, that's your domain. You need to own this domain, and you need to own this high reliability, what it means in the context of social services. Okay? There's going to be a significant overlay with everything else, but there's going to be that contextual difference. That's the difference you would find between each industry or sector. It's different. Okay? But these are the underpinning things. It all starts, remember, high reliability at heart is operations. It is how do we successfully execute operations. This is operations. Okay? Data-driven, collective, preoccupation, predict, anticipate. That's all of this thing, you know? That's what it's all about. Any other questions or comments? It's a really, really interesting concept. It's a theoretical subject matter that has the evidence to back it up as being successful. Any other questions? You must have some questions. How are we for timing?
2:43.
Okay, let me give you a 15-minute break. We'll come back and sum up a couple of take-home points, and we'll come back tomorrow and get into more quantitative methodology that will bring all of these things together, okay? So I'll see you at around 3 o'clock. Have a good break. If you have some questions, please write them down so that we can tackle it together. Okay? See you at 3.